We are with the Texas AgrAbility Project. I'm the program coordinator. My name is Mackenzie Thomas. And we're with Texas AgrAbility. It is a national organization through the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And what we do is provide services for individuals with disabilities, chronic health conditions, and functional limitations in agriculture. So I'm just going to share a few just housekeeping general webinar things with you guys before we go ahead and get started. So just a few instructions. Your microphone should be automatically muted when you join. But just to reduce background noise, if you're not speaking, have your microphone muted. You can see the icon. It might be at the bottom or top of your screen, and it's a little microphone icon. And if it has a strike through it, that means you are muted, as well as the camera. If the camera has a strike through it, that means your camera is off. You can feel free to turn those on if you have a question or any of those things. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to post those in the chat box. So you'll see a little icon at the top, or it might be at the bottom for you. That's a little kind of chat bubble. If you click that, then you should be able to pose any questions there. We will try to address some as we go, but we'll definitely have time at the end to ask any additional questions. Closed captioning is available. If you go to that same list of icons, you'll see 3 dots where you can scroll down and turn on live captions. So that is available. And like I said, the webinar will be recorded for later viewing and posted on our YouTube channel. So if for some reason you were not able to stay throughout the whole presentation, we will be recording that for later viewing. So I'm going to go ahead and admit the ones, and then we will introduce Ms. Hansel. So this is the Vocational Rehab for Self-Employment webinar, and Jeannie Hansel with Disability Rights Texas has graciously joined us today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her and let her get started. So Jeannie is a certified rehabilitation counselor since 1994. Her career started with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry Vocational Rehabilitation Unit. In this capacity, Jeannie provided VR services on behalf of industrially injured employees through a state program where services could be provided when there was litigation due to a denial of primary liability by the third-party administrator. For 4 years, Jeannie worked with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development as a career rehabilitation counselor with state services for the blind. She was appointed to the State Rehab Counselor for the Blind in 1998. Wanting to delve into private practice, Jeannie worked as a qualified rehabilitation consultant for 10 years, providing medical management, consulting, expert witness, and return to work services for industrially injured employees. Jeannie is also an advisory member to the graduate program with Minnesota State University and an active member of the National Rehabilitation Association in Minnesota, the Minnesota Rehabilitation Association chapter. In 2015, Jeannie's article regarding ethics was published through the Rehabilitation Professional. Jeannie moved to Texas in 2016 and consulted with an interdisciplinary neurological team at Rehab Without Walls, and returned to her roots in rehabilitation counseling at Disability Rights Texas. She serves as a CAP advocate with Region 6, South Texas, RGV, and Lower RGV, and El Paso County. Jeannie is currently an advisory member with National Disability Rights Network, TASC Committee, and executive board member with the Texas Rehabilitation Association, and serves on outreach, employee advancement, and cultural humility committees with DRTX. Spare time activities include trail and gravel riding, house renovations, needlework, spending time with her fiance Carl, and 2 white boxers, Cooper and Tessa. So at this time, I will turn it over to Jeannie.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And it's a pleasure being here. I had the opportunity to interact with AgrAbility, I think about a year ago. And as part of our TRA Lunch and Learn, we hosted AgrAbility and we learned a lot. And as Mackenzie mentioned, I am an active member of TRA. I enjoy training and providing training opportunities to our community. And even though I'm a CRC, I'm not working as a rehabilitation counselor. I'm an advocate with Disability Rights Texas. But I think ultimately our goal is very similar in terms of we want our clients and customers to receive amazing services and to be able to reach their goals of economic independence by working in a capacity that meets their needs. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but first, will you help me with the poll questions?
Sure. I'll go ahead and share those. So
thank you.
I think I'll have to do them one at a time. So you should see a poll question come up. If you will just select the answer you would like to choose and then submit, and then we'll give you a few seconds to answer those and then move to the next one. If you're not able to see the poll, will you please let me know in the chat?
The first question is, have you collaborated with vocational rehabilitation services? And then yes or no. Oh, about half and half, 55 and 45. Awesome.
So with that, I'll go on to the next question. Which is, are you familiar with self-employment services with TWS VRS? Yes, no, or never heard of it?
Wow, that's interesting too. 25% haven't heard of it. Well, we hope to provide you with more information today.
It seems like most of you had answered, so I'll go on to the next question. Which is, have you collaborated with the Client Assistance Program, or CAP? Yes or no?
Great.
All right, so we got, looks like most of you have answered. So I think it's the last question. I'll go ahead and launch it. Which is, do you know how to reach CAP or Disability Rights Texas? Yes, no, or not sure. So it looks about 45% say yes, 22% no, and 33% are not sure.
That's great. Well, I hope to have some information for everybody who at least responded to the poll, and for everyone in our audience. Have some takeaway. All right, are we done with our poll?
Yes, ma'am, if you're ready.
Yep, I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for today. All right. So today, obviously, I'm going to be talking about working with CAP and self-employment services. And certainly, you can work with self-employment services or with Voc Rehab and not work with CAP. But if you work with CAP, we have to be either working with someone who has a need for VR services or with services. So we definitely want to take a collaborative approach to our advocacy services. And Mackenzie was so nice to go through the introduction, so I'll skip over that. The role of the advocate with disability rights services is to provide information to people who are participating in a program such as vocational rehabilitation or for centers for independent living. And what we want to do is we want to be able to share what types of services are available under policy and federal regulation, as well as encourage our clients to engage in their own self-advocacy and find their voice. The CAP in Texas, we're separate from vocational rehabilitation services. We're administered by a different employer. We have a different grant funding set aside, and we're very different, even though we work in the same field and our paths often cross in the work that we do. So the CAP originated in the early 1970s as a result of an expose that Geraldo Rivera did when he was exploring Willowbrook School. The CAP started out as a pilot project out of the Rehab Act of 1973, and then it just kind of grew and became a mandate in the early 80s, in 1984, which meant that if VR agencies in each state, if they wanted to pull down their federal funding, because the VR offices are funded by state and federal dollars, if they wanted to be eligible for that RSA grant, they would have to have a CAP in their state. Now, CAP we don't have to be the advocates for individuals who are receiving services, but we're there as an option so that people know where to go in the event that they do need an advocate. Of course, you all are advocates with vocational rehabilitation, with AgrAbility. You might be a self-advocate, or a family member could be an advocate also. But we're mandated by the Rehab Act to be the resource, if anything, for the customers receiving vocational rehab services. So the Willowbrook State School was built for individuals who have intellectual disabilities. And it started, I believe, in the late 1950s. And it was a place where maybe families wanted, their loved ones to go for care and interaction. But what happened is we learned when Geraldo went into the school, it was overpopulated by, the school could accommodate, or the residents could accommodate 4,000 residents. And it was overpopulated to 6,000 individuals. It was unfortunate that we learned that people were not getting the care and the services that they needed to thrive. And what happened is it created an awareness that we really didn't know what was going on, and that we needed to, the United States develop the protection advocacy programs with each state. This slide talks about the history of Geraldo Rivera's expose and a link in case you wanted to look at that any further. And just to, forewarn you, it is disturbing if you look at that website. So with the Protection Advocacy Organizations, Congress passed laws to protect people with disabilities from discrimination, so that would limit their full participation in society. And we're part of the National Disability Rights Network. NDRN is our parent agency. They offer us technical assistance and training. And each state is a member, has their P&A is a member of NDRN. They might not be called Disability Rights Minnesota, for example. They're with the Minnesota Law Center. So, but each state has their own P&A, and that is listed on NDRN website. The services that we provide are at no cost to individuals who have disabilities or their families because of our grant funding. So Disability Rights Texas, we are the P&A agency for Texans who have disabilities. We're statewide. The CAP program, we are funded by RSA, and we help individuals through advocacy. I'm an advocate. I'm not an attorney. We're a nonprofit law firm. I work under an attorney. Her name is Lucia Romano, and she supervises employment, voting, accessibility, and the CAP and PABS teams. We have several teams with disability rights. It includes our intake team. Each team has its own intake contact, which is great. Texas is a large state, so we're able to have our designated intake person. Of course, we have the client assistance program, protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security. So they assist individuals when there is a barrier to employment, but they're already beneficiaries of Social Security. We do not have the funding right now to help people get on Social Security, or we also don't represent individuals in family or criminal type cases. But we do work with a lot of other, I think, significant life needs, if you could call it that, including education, housing, foster care. And I mentioned the EVA team, employment, voting, and accessibility. IRCL, which is our institutional rights and civil liberties. And when I was talking about Geraldo Rivera, that's kind of the first, I think, P&A team that developed for individuals who have intellectual disabilities. And we also have a community and healthcare team. And we have designated advocates and attorneys and paralegals and legal secretaries for most teams. What to expect when you contact Disability Rights. You'll get into our intake line by calling. We have video intake. We also have information on the web if people are more comfortable completing a web intake. Oftentimes our intake coordinator she'll follow up with a call if there's information that doesn't seem to be very clear and she needs to, maybe someone might have two issues. They might have a CAP issue and an employment issue, or they might even have a civil liberties issue also. So it does get a little confusing if we're working amongst several teams, but we do try to communicate with one another. And certainly I refer to other teams as well, just to make sure people are getting the right advocacy services. Our team, we average about 300 cases a year. And again, we are statewide. We have advocates, of course, I'm in San Antonio. We have 3 advocates in Houston, 2 advocates in DFW, an advocate in Lubbock, and an advocate in Austin. And my supervisor, Karen Stanfield, she also carries a caseload. She does some other things too, but she will definitely work with individuals, especially if we're at capacity on our teams. I would say that most of our cases are with vocational rehabilitation services versus the Centers for Independent Living. I think that's just the nature of the number of people being served by one agency over another. And sometimes people do receive both independent living services and vocational rehab. Of course, they can't duplicate services, but we can also refer in order to ensure that people are getting their needs met within the community in kind of a wraparound service. So when customers contact us, we like it when the individual who has an issue will contact us for intake or are aware, so that we know what they want advocacy services. I did have instances where very well-meaning providers contacted us, or maybe they did a web intake together and it wasn't really quite what the individual wanted, and that's okay. We don't force advocacy on anybody. But the individuals get in touch with disability rights and they talk with our intake coordinator. She gathers the information, and then we provide, informal or formal advocacy depending on the need of the individual. When we have a new referral, we staff it every Monday. Our clients are assigned to us by our CAP supervisor, and then we reach out to the individual who has a concern and with regard to their specific complaint or their specific issues. So we can provide information to families, but it's just very informational purposes only. Of course, if someone has a VR case or VR services and they're experiencing an employment issue under Title I of the ADA, CAP can also become involved and collaborate. And it gets confusing a little bit because the counselor might think that they're doing something wrong, and they're certainly not. It's just taking that collaborative approach and kind of, again, how can we work best to help the individual sort out any potential employment concerns, and also to provide information to our client about what services might be available, kind of thinking outside the box and brainstorming. And as I mentioned, our cases are assigned to us after intake, and we discuss the concern or the issues with our potential client. We don't accept every case or every issue that is presented to us. We do an investigation. So we talk with the individual and we obtain, if they want to move forward, we obtain their signature on a release form so that we can either refer our client to VR or the Center for Independent Living, or so we can obtain records and review and kind of start putting the pieces together in terms of where is that concern? Are we finding any merit, or is there something that we can actually do to help with their complaint? And of course, we talk with a VR counselor. Their input is very important and try to get their perspective. They might not even know that CAP was called or contacted. So we reach out to them and answer questions, explain kind of what I'm explaining to you, that we're in the process of investigating a concern and want to see what we can do to get things back on track. We don't do anything intentionally to get anyone in trouble. Our goal is to ensure that services are being provided to individuals, that they understand what services are available, and that that things are moving forward, that services are actually being implemented. And I'll kind of get into some reasons for, kind of examples of when we get involved. We, of course, our goal is to provide information about policy to our clients, the VR customer, and we also want to digest policy with the VR staff, because we interpret it in a way, and maybe they're not interpreting policy the same. So we want, that's a good place to talk about things. What am I not understanding or misunderstanding, or has policy changed and it went under my radar, kind of thing. So definitely want to make sure we're on the same page, because everything we do, again, has to fit within policy and federal regulations. And oftentimes I'm emailing policy to customers, to our clients, and letting them know the parameters, of how a service can be provided, or where is the counselor coming from if it can't be, if there are limitations, or if there's a different direction that they're looking at. We certainly want to address those issues and that information. And of course, federal regulations are our guide. And so every state has their own policy, but it should reflect what's in federal regulations. And we do not stay involved with a vocational rehabilitation customer for the life of their plan. Our goal is to provide services and information so we can quickly provide assistance and then back out of the picture, because that relationship between the counselor, the customer, and the provider are really important. We're there kind of to try to get things going again, and then when we're not needed anymore, we'll back out. Now, that's an agreement that we have with the customer in terms of our level of involvement. What are the issues we're trying to resolve? And of course, we have to share the issues with the counselor, because we're trying to resolve issues, but because of attorney and client confidentiality, we don't share details of things with the counselors. We definitely keep a lot of things private. And and even though I'm not an attorney, I work under my attorney's license. So that's and that can be kind of frustrating, I think, for counselors, because they're not sure if we're still involved, and it is kind of what it is, and unfortunately that can be a little bit awkward. But the customer can certainly let the counselors know when we're no longer involved. So occasionally, and we do encourage the counselors to work with their clients and inform them about due process and their appeal rights. And it should be something that's very clear, and not just handing them the "Can we talk" brochure, but to inform them about if there's a denial, what their appeal rights are. They have 180 days from the date of denial to issue an appeal. We provide guidance, or CAP provides guidance on appeals, on deadlines, and the advocates don't decide if we will represent someone at appeal. That is a decision that's made by our attorney supervisor, Lucia Romano. So we keep track of the calendar and the timelines, but it's ultimately her decision if she represents someone at appeal. But our goal is always to resolve issues at the lowest possible level, which means between the customer, CAP, and the counselor. And if we can't make any headway, then we take it up the chain of command to try to find some resolution. That's always the best, is to sort it out at the lowest possible level. CAP also has oversight and can provide assistance with systemic issues. And I think a more recent systemic issue that we've addressed is even with vehicle modifications, it was a process that was taking a very long time. And it took a long time for the state to digest the data and to really kind of understand the concern, the pros and cons of what we were seeing with our boots on the ground. But ultimately, they were able to change policy, and I think it's for the better. We're very excited about that, because we don't want our clients to experience unnecessary delays. And of course, we see some of the more complex concerns, such as vehicle modifications, maybe home modification, prosthetics, self-employment. Those are our big ones, I would have to say off the top of my head. Other things that we were able to do is to, include, and this wasn't me personally, this was under the guide, under the realm of my advocate supervisor. She was able to advocate that people receive, increase in tuition rates down payment on vehicle modifications or vehicles that were to be modified, as well as vehicle payment assistance for up to 6 months. And those two can be combined, which is very helpful to a lot of folks when they're looking at the expense of maintaining a modified vehicle. We were also able to help with the increase of mileage, and ultimately now it's the federal rate, which is wonderful. We also do a lot with voter rights, and we ensured that TWC was providing information about voting opportunities, and they had the brochures in the lobbies, and now the counselors are reviewing the voter rights and information with customers at application, which is great. Some examples of issues and concerns. A customer might be denied an application for services. They might have been determined not eligible for services without going through the process of a trial work period. And that's what that further evaluation means, is that there needs to be a real robust effort to determine that someone would not benefit from vocational rehabilitation services. I tell my clients it's hard to determine someone not eligible. And it can't be based on opinion. It can't be based on a doctor report. It's based on that, the application process and that trial work period. Sometimes clients contact us if they can't get a copy of their file, or maybe they're not getting a call back. Perhaps a counselor and their customer did not agree on the vocational goal on planned services. Or they don't agree on training, if training is going to be part of the plan. Sometimes our clients have difficulty communicating their concerns to their counselors. They don't want to offend them. They don't want to rock the boat. They want things to go smoothly, but they have needs, but they're not quite sure how to present their concerns. And they're still learning about their self-advocacy tools and might need a little bit of assistance. There might be case closure and the customer might not agree with that. We've heard a lot that the counselors are closing the inactive cases, and of course that might initiate a call to figure out why was their case closed, and then maybe even a call to the client assistance program for information about how to reopen their case or some advocacy in doing so. And maybe the one that you're most interested in is the counselor might not agree with self-employment, or they might tell their customer that VR does not provide self-employment services. And we do hear that on occasion. And I don't know where that comes from, because it's very clear there's a big chapter on self-employment within policy, but that is the takeaway at any rate that our clients have, is that self-employment's not an option for them. And I put a list of resources here in case you wanted, and I can certainly email Mackenzie a copy of my PowerPoint presentation. But you can find self-employment resources in the manual, the Vocational Rehab Services Manual, the VRSM. Self-employment services are in Chapter C, actually 1100. And the standard for providers, Chapter 19, there's a chapter about the technical assistance, so from the CBTACs. I think that's really helpful to read about what the providers can do. It kind of makes it a little bit more, I think, rounded out in terms of services. And I also put in my PowerPoint a list of the forms relating to self-employment. There's a lot of forms, and I understand some folks with AgrAbility and are also completing forms, which is great. You're doing what you can to help your client, your participant in your program. So I don't need to tell you that there are a lot of forms. So as we know, VR can support a customer interested in starting his or her own business or to help them maintain their business, like, farm or ranch. That's self-employment. And the definition is self-employment is employment in which an individual works for profit, whether it is in his or her solely owned business or located within an existing business, like a subcontract position, like a barber or a nail salon. And so when I first was learning more about AgrAbility, because remember, I hadn't been in state VR for a while and I was going back to my roots, I'm like, where is AgrAbility in policy? Because AgrAbility has a lot of resources and creative thinking people. A lot of, when I worked in neuro rehab, I really appreciated how OTs, PTs, the speech language pathologists all thought outside the box. And you can really look at things that seem very complicated and make it seem like it's very easy. And AgrAbility is mentioned in policy under technology services, under C 200. And it says and it does refer to AgrAbility as self-employment. It states, for assessments specific to farm or ranch employment, the VR considers purchasing services from Texas AgrAbility. And then it gives a link to the web page. And it says I think, in my opinion, it could be a little bit more clear. Maybe that's something that we want to talk about in the future, is how do we provide this information and education to counselors who might not be aware of AgrAbility, and especially in Texas, where so much of our community is rural. And then I went to the Texas agriculture website. And of course, you probably already know this, that Texas leads the nation in number of farms and ranches, with 248,416 farms and ranches covering 127 million acres. Of the 408,000 producers in Texas, 37% are women. I thought that was pretty cool. And I put the link from where I obtained that information. So I think, as we know, ranching and farming is a very viable form of self-employment. In rehab and voc rehab, there are different kinds of self-employment. There's simple self-employment, comprehensive self-employment, and supported self-employment. And it goes from something that's not so specific, or maybe it is specific, but it's more concise, to a comprehensive self-employment plan is very detailed. And then supported self-employment includes supports and long-term and natural supports that individuals might need, just as if they were looking for supported job placement. In the manual, self-employment is where it's a sole proprietorship. It can be an LLC. The state does not provide services. They don't provide capital. They don't provide sponsorship, I guess, for corporations or nonprofits. That being said, there's a lot that the state can do to support self-employment. And goods and services, I think, are pretty robust, and might even, if one were to put a monetary amount on it, maybe, and the information and the guidance and counseling they receive might outweigh any sort of capital. So the state agency can help with advertising cost, business plan evaluations, business planning assistance, initial inventory and supplies, legal fees, and to note that the attorney is hired to represent the customer. The attorney is not hired to represent the state. So it's very, very clear in policy about that. A maintenance of up to 16 weeks. They can help with rent or lease payments. It used to be 6 months at $299 for that. And I was looking at policy the other day, and I think it changed. I'll have to double check on that. But that's what it was more recently, and again, that might have changed. They can also provide assistance with tools and equipment and utilities. And you notice that AT is not a part of that, because I think that's sort of, you know, assistive technology is kind of a given in terms of it's not in a business plan, but it's part of the plan. So as you know, the contents of a business plan includes all of this information. And I hope that you don't feel like you're winging it, you know, that you feel like you have that feedback, that support, you know, in terms of supporting your client. And of course, when a counselor closes a self-employment case, they the counselor and the client define what those benchmark measures are for wages. Sometimes people might be a beneficiary of Social Security, so you know they might at first be augmenting their benefits or putting it into a pass plan or an ABLE account. Of course, business has been in operation for 90 days, And again, that the customer and client agree on business stability measures. I worked with a gentleman in self-employment, and he and his counselor decided, rather than looking at a wage or a monetary benchmark, they were looking at how, he was in the real estate industry, not a real estate agent, but he was in the real estate industry. They decided how many loans he would close in a month or in a quarter. And I thought that was pretty cool that they came up with that. It was creative, and they were happy with that measurement. So I'm hoping that way you're not seeing things too rigid in your AgrAbility self-employment plans.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I did, I put my contact information, but I'll certainly forward my my PowerPoint presentation to you so you can have some of the information and the resources. But I'm hoping that I answered some questions in terms of, how YCAP exists, how we can get involved, the flexibility of self-employment and other services, and then maybe how we all could work together if needed.
I think that'd be perfect. And also, if there's anyone still on that wants to get a copy of the presentation slides, when she sends those to me, if you'll just put your email address in the chat, I will go ahead and forward that along to you. And I can include your contact information as well, so that's easy to get to.
Great. Yes.
And if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can post those in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And in the meantime, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing that information with us. I learned several new things about just the client assistance program and ways that you can be involved sooner rather than later, but also just some more information about vocational rehab policy related to self-employment. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure the conversations will continue from us to you guys on working with clients that are doing self-employment in agriculture. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, and I thank you, and I appreciate the work that you do. I don't know if I told you, my family has old roots in agriculture and farming in Wisconsin, and it was a big part of our our family, our heritage. Yeah, yeah.
And Wisconsin also has a really large AgrAbility project as well. So that's really neat.
Yep, it's very cool. And I hope that we have a chance to have some just brainstorming sessions sometime. Let me know. Be happy to get together.
We definitely will. We'll definitely stay in touch on that and collaborating with a lot of our clients, especially the ones working with vocational rehab. I did post a link in the chat to a quick survey. It should only take a couple minutes. If any of you would like to, that really helps us out to see what we do well and what we could do better. And if you learned anything or gained any new knowledge or information from today's presentation. So we'll stay on a few more minutes if there's any other questions, but we appreciate you for joining us today. And again, thank you, Jeannie, for joining us and sharing this really valuable information.
You are so welcome. I guess one thing I did not mention is that oftentimes what I will do, or CAP does, is facilitate a referral to vocational rehab. So if you have a participant who you think might be a good candidate, we would be happy to facilitate. We call it a supervised referral, and we make sure we talk with our client to figure out how involved you want us to be, and whether it's from real short, like information referral, or through the plan development.
Awesome. That would be very helpful for some of our clients too. Thank you.
It's kind of, yeah. So it just depends. Everyone's different.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.